All right. Welcome, everyone. This is the GameCult Talks event, free collaborative game histories. My name is Maria Garda. I will be your host today, and I'm very excited to welcome our panelists and our audience on YouTube and on Twitter. Before we get any further, maybe a few words about what are the GameCult Talks series and the subject collaborative game histories. So the GameCult Talks series is a series of online discussions, panels curated by the Center of Excellence in Game Culture Studies. You are on our YouTube channel, so if you want to learn more, you can just click in the description. But our research center is focused on game cultures. It is a collaboration of University of Turku, Tampere University, and University of Jyväskylä, funded by Academy of Finland. And in this series, we would like to engage with more general public, different societal actors to discuss the issues that are at the core of our research. And game heritage and game histories are definitely very important to us. And with the collaborative game histories, it is kind of a brand. We were also at the Center of Excellence with collaboration of a Finnish Museum of Games exploring since 2019. So we had seminars, webinars, and with this event, we can discuss those subjects once again with our guests. Okay, so this is a picture of us at the Center of Excellence, but now let's move on to our panelists. So we have alphabetical order here, which happens that I'm first. So we will just maybe present ourselves following this order. So first me, then Satu Haapakoski, representing Art of Coding Initiative today, Tapani Joelsson from the Kasettilamerit retrogaming group, Niklas Nylund from the Finnish Museum of Games, and Lauri Ojanen from the National Library of Finland. And I will be moderating today together with Usfa Freeman from the Tampere University. She's actually the mastermind behind the GameCult Talks series, and today she's helping us with streaming as the master of ceremony. She will also be taking care of the chat questions when we kind of go to the discussion. So how it works now, I will ask the panelists for short introductions, and then we will discuss within our panel the kind of main questions, and then we will open up to your questions. So, you know, this is a very kind of relaxed atmosphere, I hope, and we can discuss the topic freely. All right, so I guess I'm first. I don't want to take too much time, so I would just like to plug two of the recent publications I was involved in. So I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Turku. I have a PhD in cultural studies. I'm Polish, so I mostly work with game histories related to Poland and Eastern Europe. We have published recently a book, New Media Behind the Iron Curtain, with Piotr Sitajski and Krzysztof Jajko from my alma mater, University of Łódź, about cultural history of different new media in the 1980s. And I was responsible for microcomputers, and microcomputers meant playing games in the 80s. Then there's a book by the one and only Melanie Swalwell, Game History and the Local, where I have a chapter with my great colleague and collaborator Paweł Grabarczyk about the late 8-bit games in Poland in the 1990s. So this is what I do. I'm involved with game histories for over 10 years now, working with different heritage institutions around the world, as I also did a postdoc with Melanie in Australia. But today we are focusing mostly on the Finland case. So let's move on to Satu. would you like to continue now? Maybe because you don't have slides, we will just move to the main slide. We can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Thank you very much, Maria. All right. So hi everybody. It's nice to be here. So I'm a Demoscener, and I've been a part of the Art of Coding initiative, which we are trying to get the Demoscene to get recognized as UNESCO in the UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage. And we've managed to get the status of national status in Finland and also in Germany, which is great. And we'll see if we get the other countries also together, and we someday get to collaborate with the application for the UNESCO of the whole world. So we'll see what happens. As right now, I'm working in heritage fields. So I work as a conservator at the Collection Move project in National Museum. But now I'm actually on a study leave because I study IT, and I'm doing my internship at the Finnish Heritage Agency IT department. So kind of different kind of museum IT. So also I'm part of the Nordic Association of Conservators. I'm a member of the and we are making a group of people that are interested about digital heritage that is purely culturally meaningful digital heritage, and how we should preserve, how we should present those kind of materials in museums. There's a lot of talk about that going on in a lot of places, and we hope to get some kind of field where there could be conservators and also other professionals talking about this matter, and also the hobbyists, because right now the main knowledge and the most of the know-how is with the one place is Demoscene, which is my other family. So yeah, I'm kind of an IT and also heritage guy, and I'm really passionate about preserving digital heritage and how we should approach that material. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's move on now. Who is next? I think it's the Kasettilamerit and Tapani.
Yes, thank you. And you can move to the next slide. Yeah, so I'm Tapani Joelsson. I'm representing the Kasettilamerit Association. We are a preservation group formed by around 15 core people. We have been doing this since 2011, but we pretty much had to become more official by forming an association in 2019, because that helps us with organizing things with other organizations and also makes it possible for us to possibly get funding, which is one of our problems that I will be touching upon later. Our members are all doing something different. Maybe the most common thing that is similar is that we dump material, meaning that we convert the old tapes and other medias to digital image formats. That is something that I'm also doing, but my specialty is seeking information about old software. Are they existing anymore? Where are the makers? And how to contact them, and trying to figure out how to publish that software, because the old copyrights are really myriad. But maybe we can move to the next slide. I pretty much covered the dumping, but what we do with, or not what, but what we are dumping is that it's not just games. We also try to collect all the programs, Demoscene products, everything that the hobbyists did in the 80s and 90s or 70s, old computers, self-built computers, videos, films, paper archives, old hobbyist magazines and stuff like that. So it's a never-ending field that we are trying to go through. And on that process, we have to document formats of data formats and other things that are not familiar to anyone anymore. So it's lots of detective work. We have to do our own tools. And that means that we have lots of know-how that needs to be shared also at some point when we have the time. But the most important thing that we want to share at some point is the data that we have collected. But there we run into the problems of copyrights and stuff like that, because we as an association go by the law. So we cannot release everything that we find because it's illegal. There are copyright holders. That's maybe about us at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now we are moving to Niklas.
Hello, my name is Niklas. I'm from the Finnish Museum of Games, where I work as a researcher, and I recently got a PhD on game heritage. You can find it through the link I put there. And I've been working with museums, I guess, about 10 years, more than 10 years, working mainly with exhibitions, but also with collections. I think we can move on to the next slide. So I come from the Finnish Museum of Games. I'm happy to say that we're open at the moment. We're located in Tampere, in Vapriikki Museum Center. And yeah, we are a museum dedicated to Finnish games, and there's quite a lot of stuff to see and explore. But maybe we move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about our collections, because I think it's maybe more interesting in this setting, in this panel. So we also have collections that are not shown in the exhibitions. There's lots of photographs that we have gotten as donations. We have done quite many interview videos, mainly with game makers, but also different types of play communities, and published documentaries. You can find them on our YouTube page, which should be quite easy to Google. And of course, we also have sort of more traditional stuff related to games, like retail boxes or storage media, related to both commercially published games, but also non-commercial games. And we focus not only on digital games, but also on other types of games, such as board games and role-playing games. And recently, we also started building up sort of digital ethnographic collections as well, doing ethnographic work in digital worlds. But we can move on to the last slide, because I think this is I'm very happy to be part of the panel, because collaboration is something that we're based on from the beginning. So the museum was actually partly founded by Pelikone Peijonit collector group, and who sort of collaborated with the Tampere Historical Museums, where I come from. And we also collaborated a lot with the Game Research Lab in Tampere University, as well as the Center of Excellence in Game Culture Studies, where Maria comes from. But also other types of organizations, and I'm happy that most of these are part of the panel today. So Kasettilamerit, we've done lots of work on digitizing games, and recently Tapani has done some excellent work in finding people who have made games. Also, we have collaborated with the National Library, Wikimedia Finland, and various hobbyist groups in making exhibitions, etc. And also we're part of the Art of Coding initiative, which Satu talked about. So I'm really happy to be here and talk about collaboration. Thank you.
Okay, well, it is really clear that Tampere and the Finnish Museum of Games is really at the center of this collaboration as the main kind of exhibition site. But we will talk about that soon enough. Now we have our last panelist, Lauri Ojanen.
Hello, my name is Lauri Ojanen. I work as a library secretary in the National Library of Finland, and in there I work in the legal deposit office, where one of my specialties is games. We can move to the next slide. I think we are the only group here which works because of the law are we preserve games published in Finland, as well as game-related online resources as specified in the Act on Collecting and Preserving Cultural Material. Digital games were added in 2008, but board games, I'm not actually quite sure when they were added to the law, but we've got games since the late 1800s as board games. So that collection is quite large and old. In total, our game collection is approximately 2,000 items, which include board games, card games, role-playing games, video games, and puzzles. And we also have game-related online resources, which include, for example, MBNet's Apaja, which some of you may know, YouTube videos, game forums, web pages, etc. We can move to the next slide. And some of the projects we have done are game-related online harvests, which we have done in 2010, 2015, and 2020. In 2015, the Game Museum helped us and a few other hobbyists, but last year we opened up the harvest to public and we asked what kind of online materials we should harvest from the internet, and we got around 50 suggestions, which was pretty good. I don't remember how many web pages we actually harvested, but there's a lot of stuff, including YouTube videos, web pages, social media accounts, etc., etc. What we are doing right now is that we are cataloging Finnish games from the MBNet's Apaja. Apaja was this kind of platform for microbittis subscribers where they could download and upload games and other softwares to that platform. I don't know how many thousand, probably even tens of thousands different softwares were uploaded there, but what we're interested in is the Finnish games in Apaja. And right now we're cataloging that stuff there. Our approximate is that there are 2,500 to 3,000 games there. So there's quite a lot of work to do in that. We've started it right now. We have probably cataloged around 200 games, which were released on DOS. So it's a start. What we also have done are digitizing of board games. You can go to doria.fi and download freely the board games which have expired on copyrights. There are, I don't remember the number, but there are several games from the 1800s to around 1950s, which you can download and print and game, basically. And also our magnetic medias have been digitized. We have a small collection of games which were released to VIC-20 and Commodore 64 on cassette tapes and on several disc formats. We started by ourselves in Mikkeli in 2015, but in 2018, Kasettilamerit finished the whole digitized project in 2018. So we've done also some cooperation with Kasettilamerit with great success. And we've also cooperated with Game Museum on our game exhibition, which was in 2019. So almost everyone here is pretty familiar to us.
Okay, great. I will stop sharing the slides, so now we can focus on the discussion. All right, that is really exciting. I'm very happy that we are talking today because, like, on many occasions, I am kind of embarrassing my Finnish colleagues talking about how excellent is the collaboration on game preservation in Finland. And today they can, it's not me talking about you guys, but it's actually you presenting the different projects and then continuing on the discussion. So the kind of main question I am interested in is, how important is the collaboration of academia, GLAM sector, museums, and retro gaming, different kind of amateur historians, fan initiative. How this collaboration is important to the long-term preservation of games. Like, I guess the question implies it is, but I just think it's quite interesting to look at how it works in Finland, and how do you guys feel about this this collaboration yourself? Maybe we can start with Niklas, because the Finnish Museum of Games, as you said, kind of emerged from this collaboration, and it is a place where many of those initiatives meet.
Well, yeah, as said, it is very important, and I don't think that the Finnish Museum of Games would exist without this collaboration. I think Jaakko Suominen and others have talked quite interestingly about the self-authorized heritage, which sort of a form of heritage which hobbyists might see as important, games in this case, and which they start doing work towards preserving that. And obviously this has happened quite a long time ago already, like 20, 30 years ago maybe. And like the last 10 years, hobbyists have been very, very active in doing this kind of work. And sort of, I'd say that one of the impulses to start an actual museum came from this work. And the sort of museum sector saw that the work that these self-authorizing hobbyists were doing is important, and it could be made sort of more authorized with the help of the museum. And sort of also at this point, the academic field is doing kind of different types of work and studying maybe things that the hobbyists aren't really interested in or don't really care about. So that helped us when we were setting up the museum to sort of find different frameworks to understand the game history or game heritage by. So and also the like very, very helpful donators and people who have been participating in the work otherwise in setting up a museum has been very important. So yeah, it's something that's, I think, is at the core of how I understand heritage, especially sort of heritage dealing with the present day should be done by working together with different types of actors doing different things that they specialize in.
Yeah, I think that is a very good point that you are making here. And this is part of a discussion we had a few days ago, that, you know, what is game heritage is also at the center of all our endeavors here. And clearly, as you said in research, I was also able to be part of by Anna Sivola and Jaakko Suominen. You know, we are looking at the heritage communities and how the heritage process is reliant on those communities. So kind of embracing of the community and the collaborations here are really crucial. But I guess this is where Niklas and I are on the same page, that the game heritage is the heritage community in many ways, and we are just here to kind of try to serve the needs, being the part of the community, and help it grow with the means we have. Different means museum has, different kind of approach with the academia and kind of research grants we can have, and then try to support the preservation. But I was wondering, what is the approach to game heritage of other panelists? I see that Tapani unmuted, so I assume you want to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that from our perspective, from the Kasettilamerit perspective, the importance of the other actors is, I don't know, can you even measure it? Because let's take Pelimuseo. They can have exhibitions and they can show the games, let people play them. That is something that we don't have resources. And also we have lots of material, even at the moment, that probably doesn't exist anywhere. But like I don't have any place to store them. So I will be donating a lot of stuff to Pelimuseo and also to Kansalliskirjasto during this month, because I don't have proper places to storage them. So they have the know-how. So we are probably like the low-level food workers collecting stuff, and we try to present them to the more established actors that can actually do something with them. So alone we could just be preserving stuff to our bedrooms and closets, but with the big public actors, we can also present them to the people.
Yeah, that is a very fair point. And kind of, when the hoarding gets to a certain critical mass, which I also experienced myself. And when I was moving to Australia, I had to let go of my apartment. So I also donated all this stuff to a retro gaming group in my home city. So yeah, I think in a way it's a natural process that, with the collectors just amassing all these incredible artifacts, and then you just want to do something, you want to show them to the world. So what about other point of views? Game community and game heritage is a kind of intersection of other cultures, as the Demoscene is. So maybe, Sato, maybe you can kind of tune in on the subject.
I actually kind of also, I would like to remind that I think it's very important that we take the hobbyists and different people that do game stuff as their hobby in consideration when we think about the values and what are we preserving, because we don't have a lot of resources. There is not one museum that has unlimited resources. Storing stuff is quite expensive, and it's very we sometimes have to make selection of what do we save and how. So I think it's important to take the community into this consideration, because they have the best knowledge. What is the meaning of this material? And it should also be remembered that we should also store this information, because I think it makes, if you have a game, it is important to know why are we saving exactly that game and what is the meaning of it. Is there some kind of meaning with that game with Finnish history, like if you think about Rovio and Angry Birds, it definitely is. And also there is smaller games, and there's also something kind of bubbling underground, which is not very visible for the mainstream researchers that see only the big picture. So that's why also the people, the community, they know what is meaningful. So I think they should be taken in with this talk about the value of this material and the meaning.
Yes, that is a very good point. And also you kind of hinted at how the kind of heritage process sometimes maybe is a bit random in a way, like with the Permille game, right? That it was just sometimes how the things get found. Well, the case of the Permille game is something that we are now researching together with Kasettilamerit and Niklas and Niklas, who is here. So yes, so Permille is an interesting case of a game that was found in the woods. So basically this kind of Finnish ET case of an excavation, but that was in New Mexico in the desert, so like the equivalent of the desert abundance of the forest in in Finland. It is an educational game from the 1980s, published by this Alko monopoly, in order to teach about the risks of alcohol consumption. So now it is being researched because of the kind of unique process that was kind of forgotten, and now it was uncovered. And then the forensic process involved in making it work is really interesting. So I think it's really interesting to see how the collections also arise. That, you know, sometimes it's one collector donating the stuff he was or she was collecting, and usually it starts with kind of the classics, and then you get more interested in more unique objects, and then you just find stuff in the woods. But a very different case is with the National Library, because you have this vast archives. Well, maybe it's also a kind of journey of discovery for you to see what you have there. But can you tell us more, Lauri, about the process you do?
Yeah, well, our goal is to preserve everything because of the law. So we don't do that kind of curating thing. So our point is just to keep stuff available to researchers so they can find them and research those objects. So we don't do that kind of curating stuff. But maybe what I would like to add to Tapani's talk is that, you know, Kasettilamerit isn't just a low point or kind of low ground, because you have the know-how how to digitize these things. We have the know-how how to preserve physical objects, but we don't know what to do with the digital objects. We can keep the cassettes and the diskettes in our, you know, where we preserve them, but we don't know how to, you know, do the digital images of those objects so they can be preserved to future generations. So I think the importance of hobbyists for us is that know-how. But yeah, we would just like the researchers to find the stuff we keep. And we have our own issues with that, because copyright laws are also pretty strict on us. We can only put some of the digitized objects to our legal deposit workstations, which are somewhat hard to get to. So, you know, that's why we also collaborate with game museums, so we can know the needs of researchers, and also with universities, so we can help you guys find out what we have.
Yes, that is really interesting, the different kind of competences here. But I just want to have a question about the legal deposit, because in different countries, of course, I think it's in most of the European countries that you have this requirement of a legal deposit. But how do you enforce it, or how does it work in Finland? Like, are people really voluntary submitting? Is it like a kind of well-established practice with publishers? Because I know that in other countries, it's just really hard and people kind of don't do it. And then basically the libraries have no real, you know, there is no legal deposit police to enforce you to submit your published work.
Yeah, one of my jobs is to inform the publishers of this legal deposit thing, so they could send their objects. I'm glad we have pretty good cooperation with publishers in the recent years, so we mostly get what everyone should send. So the situation is pretty good right now. But there's a lot of work trying to dig out who are the publishers, who has the obligation to send the game to us, because especially in the video game sector, there's multiple publishers, and they're probably not even Finnish. They can be abroad anywhere, so it's quite a complex thing to figure out who is the responsible participant who gives us the legal deposit.
Well, that is really interesting. If we can kind of dwell into that for a moment. So basically, you are trying to, you know, kind of map what is published each year, and then just try to find out who is the publisher and approach them?
Yeah, basically like that.
Okay. Well, that is a lot of work. Like you have to be really monitoring and screening the situation, and with all the different games being published, online. I guess it's easy with the stores, like with Steam, Apple Store, whatnot. Then you just like kind of look at that library. But if something is published outside, I guess it is kind of impossible for you even to track.
Yeah, there are some hard like the indie games that don't come to the stores. They are pretty difficult for us to map, and I think in digital games we have the issue of what kind of file we should get and how do we store that file, because right now CSC doesn't have any kind of how should I call it? They are not supporting digital game formats right now, so we are kind of figuring out what to do with that field. But if there's a disk of that, we get that. So that's a plus side with digital games. But with board games and kind of like physical copies, it's much easier. But digital games are a bit tricky for us right now, and that's why we hope to collaborate with different sectors of game communities.
Thank you for that. So speaking of the competencies, going back to that kind of line of inquiry, so Tapani, can you actually tell us how do you know your know-how? How come you are an expert in forensics, and you are the it seems that you are the sage here, that in Finland, if someone wants to preserve something, they have to ask Kasettilamerit if it's based on cassettes, at least.
I'm actually the wrong member to talk about the digital forensics. I do have the equipment. It's actually under the table at the moment, but I'm more of an how I power this on and how I flip the floppies. The other guys will be better on telling about the technical stuff, but in general level, all the competence that we have has been accumulated during the years of just doing it, trying to figure out how to read these floppies. They are in X format. Okay, let's read the data and let's start looking at it, how to interpret it, how to run it. It's just hard work from year 2011 at least. Of course, some people have been coding and building electronics before that, but concentrating on this topic, we have been doing it now for 10 years. So it's just wasting all your 3 hours after work.
So trial and error, and just I guess immense motivation to solve the problem and find the solution.
Yeah, because there are so many formats in different physical mediums that sometimes you don't just know. You don't even know. You just have a floppy. All you can do is read the bits of it off from it, and then it might take days, weeks, or months that somebody figures out what to do with it. And we actually know what was on the disk. Or was there anything? Was it an empty floppy?
Well, that is, that must be a bit disappointing discovery. But then you learn with the process how to access other disks, I guess. Yeah. Now let's move maybe to the Demoscene, because the Demoscene is in a very different situation regarding preservation, because everything is kind of self-preserved in archives at Scene.org or Demoscene. Like, everything is just by the community, is kind of curated, and I guess the goal of the community is, as with Lauri and the National Library, to preserve everything, and the efforts are really kind of very successful, I would say. And also the recent kind of outreach to more kind of general public in the last decade at least, and with this UNESCO project, I think this is this is very promising. So, Satu, how do you feel about the preservation of the Demoscene heritage, how it's being done?
Well, of course, because the scene is very active and they are doing a lot of things themselves, and they have the know-how and the resources. This is kind of good because we have a lot of resources. We don't have to pay somebody to, you know, do websites or stuff. We do it ourselves. But there is this problem that it's not an official kind of authority that does this preserving. So if somebody just decides that, okay, I don't want to have this page anymore, I'm just going to delete it, and it deletes everything, and then it's just gone. So there is a problem with when you have all this material in privately owned resources. I don't think it's going to happen because Demoscene, there is a lot of people involved and they do love what they do. But this is always the risk. And at least now when Demoscene is getting acknowledged as a real meaningful phenomenon, I would say that it would be very meaningful to start storing computer demos also in different official platforms. And I think, Lauri, I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but I heard from a few of my friends that somebody asked Assembly that could they give their demos and their archive to national archives. And this is great, but also it's kind of problematic because Assembly is only one of the Finland's Demoscene parties. It's the biggest one. It has the nicest and most effort taking demos that are kind of cream of the crop, like here. But then there's other parties which is smaller, and they also have great demos. And they actually sometimes have a lot of, they might be something to do with political stuff, and they usually tell about the recent phenomena. So I think that would be also very meaningful to store those demos too.
Yeah, I do agree that, you know, Assembly is just the cream of the crop, but of course everything should be stored and made to be visible to the public. I'm not entirely sure what our Demoscene collection is right now. I believe I've heard we have some sort of collection from Assembly, but not otherwise. I know that Apaja had some demos which were made for Commodore 64, which we have, but I don't know if we have any kind of meaningful ways to present them right now. But we have them in store, so that's something.
Yeah, if you ever need help with kind of to get the knowledge of different parties and how you could also get those materials, just contact me.
Yeah, I will.
And there is a lot of also, I think Niklas and Game Museum people would also connect you with people. So
yeah.
Yeah. It really looks at the Demoscene preservation, which includes also like crack intros to different video games, is kind of getting to maybe next level. Niklas, I think you wanted to share your thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, I think it's very good that the scene itself is sort of preserving its past, but maybe I have a bit of a critical point, and something that we talked a lot about in connection with games is sort of what do we concentrate on when we want to preserve something. And clearly the Demoscene is kind of most interested in the technical achievement it has done, the actual files, the programs, the demos. But sort of as a museum worker, I kind of get the question, does that really sort of preserve what the people were thinking or the values they had? And I think it's a very good initiative that the Demoscene is now part of the intangible heritage, which is exactly concerned with that. But I haven't really seen any sort of major steps in that direction yet. But it's sort of, I think this is going to be a long process where maybe the Demoscene itself starts to understand that, okay, the demos are good and there's the center of what we're doing, but there's also all the other stuff. There's the people who make these demos. There's the values they have, the experiences they have had, and the networks they form. And maybe there's all kinds of other types of material, like material artifacts. Maybe we could look at like computers on which the first demos were made, or like just archive papers somebody might have that are involved in planning some of the first demos or something, and kind of always look at it as a larger whole than just the end product it produces. And this is something that is very familiar to me from the game side, because for a long time hobbyist preservationists were quite focused on the files, on the retail boxes, but didn't really look that much outside of this. And kind of I guess what museums can also do, besides kind of helping the hobbyists in preserving their work, long time preserving, is also to ask the critical questions, that maybe the difficult questions, maybe sort of help the community to see that they might also be doing other stuff which might be more helpful in the preservation as well, in sort of very general terms.
Yeah, those are very good points that I agree with. I just would like to plug our friend's Gleb Albert's project, Got Papers. So he's precisely collecting all this kind of ephemera related to the Demoscene. And as you said, Niklas, Demoscene is also the people, and well, probably mostly the people even. But it is those are kind of the human connections that are making the history of games and the Demoscene interconnected, because so many important studios in Finnish game history are based on Demoscene groups. So especially in the Finnish context, the interrelations of the Demoscene and game histories, this is just like one history that is very closely interconnected. So I think we really cannot preserve one without preserving both. Following what Niklas said, that was the kind of the zeitgeist. Like the gamers and the game creators of the 80s, of the 90s, they were immersed in the Demoscene and like aesthetically basically inspired by it. So I think it's important to understand that cultural moment. But then again, you have to preserve the games as files and as at least kind of playable entities as much as you can. Now we are kind of getting into James Newman area of research. Should we kind of let go at a certain point of games as playable entities? Niklas would like to have an opinion about that.
Yeah, if I can continue here, I think that's a very good question, and sort of the playable game has been very much in the center, but we could, like coming from the museum field, we could also criticize that. Do we actually do the same thing with archaeological collections, for example? Do we think that if we find something in an archaeological collection that people should be able to use that object? No, that never happens, because those objects are we don't see archaeological collections in that way. Maybe they might do some replicas of the original stone equipment or something and let people use that. But still, they have other means of actually telling the story of what they were used as or how they were used. And I think we should, I'm not saying that preserving playable games is bad, but it's not the only option we have. And I think that's something that we could keep in mind, that we have other ways that we can learn from other fields in sort of make or keep the games alive and understand them, other ways than playing.
Lauri, please.
Yeah, that's one of the things what we do with online game harvests is that we save, for example, let's play videos from YouTube, so we have the context of current games for the next generations too. So we don't just have the game, we have also the online information, probably even game forums where people have talked about the game. So we have some kind of context for that for the researchers too. So that's something what we've learned from the game museum and from researchers, so what we should do.
Yeah, I could also continue and a little bit kind of give my own 5 cents for what Niklas told. As a conservator, I think about there is certain levels of this matter. There is, if you think about a computer, you have the physical object, and then you have the programs that is inside, and then you also need the know-how. And I think we should try to preserve this all if it's possible. But of course, the first thing usually, well, if you think about the kind of like material, if we have everything stored in a perfect condition, and also the software is stored in good way, the first thing to be gone would be the physical, because there's a lot of plastic, and that's kind of deteriorating really fast. And it's kind of a problem in a lot of museums. So I would say that I would not like to think just one part of this material. I would like to think that it's all of the parts that we should remember. And this is also something that is kind of problematic, because there is a lot of museums that they have like computers and they just think about the material, and they might not remember that they might need to kind of get the data out of the computer before you just left it on the shelf of the storage place, or yeah, you need to store the data differently. And I think you don't want to think about these things as a separate. I think they should be taught as a whole and should not be forgotten. And if you think about also within the games, is it any more original if you've removed it from the kind of like, you have the game casing or floppy or something, and you take the game out? What is the original? That is also kind of a question with programs. But I think this is a larger conversation and needs a lot of input from different professionals. But I would say my opinion is that we need to look at these things as a whole.
Yes, I think we all agree that it's a very multifaceted a problem that involves a lot of different expertise, and I guess that's why we are here. But you mentioned the question of plastic, which is like a perfect cue for me to relate to the questions of sustainability, which are kind of a growing concern. So like looking at my background here, so we still have views, we can have views like that in 100 years. So with sustainability and game preservation, we are of course not talking about only kind of ecological aspects of it, which are of course important. And I guess I will have questions here to Tapani, how he sees that with the use of electricity and just how to store all these files in the kind of most responsible way, trying to have like the smallest carbon footprint possible, etc. But with the sustainability, it's also about what do we preserve, like the inclusivity of the heritage, so we don't leave out any kind of smaller communities. Yeah, and I guess maybe let's start with Tapani and that technical question. Do you think you can kind of at least share some thoughts on the subject?
I don't think that we have thought about that aspect really. But in practical level, storing all the digital material, yeah, we do need a server running up somewhere, taking electricity all the time. In our scale, it's pretty much. It's not in a bedroom. I think it's in a cellar somewhere near Tampere. But in larger scale, then let's say the National Library are probably using server space provided by university or this computer center of CCS. What was their
CSC?
Yeah. So they probably are taking that in consideration because they are a larger scale operator, and in their scale of using electricity is so huge that they probably are looking at that matter even not maybe from sustainability, but from economical perspective, that they need to find ways to use less electricity for the computers and for cooling the server spaces. And in Finland, server spaces are taking advantage of our climate, that half of the year is cold enough so that you don't have to be cooling, you just dry the air and let that cold winter air take care of the rest. So I don't think that I have our official statement about sustainability. We have been more concentrating on just the fact that all the material is vanishing and we have to somehow collect it, and everything else comes after that.
Well, of course, that is a very important first step. I will let you talk, Niklas, in a second. But yeah, I think that we can start discussing how to approach it long term. And again, as you are saying, Finland is a perfect place to preserve game heritage because of this kind of climate. That allows you for the storage in low temperatures.
Yeah. Just a side note about our climate, it's also great for storing stuff in all the warehouses that people are storing all stuff, because it stays dry. It doesn't rot or get moldy like all the stuff from England that's old. You can really...
That's interesting. I had no idea that because of the humidity and the Gulf Stream from the Gulf of Mexico that the UK has this sort of problems. And
please do order one cassette from England from 1980s and just open the package. You know where it's from.
Yeah, you sound like some kind of wine connoisseur that could figure out, is it coming from Cornwall or Scotland, based on the different microbes and the mold. Yeah, and the mold. But those are the kind of very practical issues that we also have to deal with. So I think it's good to start to think about it, whether it's an economical need or a kind of just kind of idealist wish to help the climate action. I think this is something we should also take into account. But Niklas, you wanted to join the...
Yeah, maybe a few thoughts on the issue of ecological sustainability, and something that we talked with Maria also before. Is sort of in the hobbyist world, maybe in Demoscene, in game preservation, there's kind of an idea of preserving everything by the best possible standards, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem at the moment, when people are mostly concentrating on sort of floppy disks or something, which don't take that much space. But it could possibly become a problem when we start to talk about sort of CD-ROMs or DVDs or video formats. So if we want to preserve everything in the best possible standard, it's like digital collections are quite soon going to be huge. And of course, that's something that's also otherwise happening worldwide now, when everything is going digital and Google servers are taking like massive amounts of data and are also using massive amounts of electricity. But I think this might be something that we should talk about in the game preservation. Do we always need to have the best possible, the biggest possible files related to old games, or could we find some other ways of maybe just use metadata approaches and just describe what happens in the game, instead of preserving all games, which are, there's going to be more and more and more and more games. We know that hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of games are coming out each year. So this is just, I don't know, something that we maybe should talk about in the future.
Okay. Well, definitely this is a conversation we should continue, as you know, with the kind of long-term collaboration here, we are talking about collaboration that is going past our own lifetimes, you know. So I know that it kind of feels weird because you are always focused on kind of preserving things that are being lost right now. Like in my case, you know, I'm doing oral histories and trying to interview people because they might not be available for interviews in 10 years, you know. So I understand this kind of urgency, but on the other hand, we have to also look on the kind of different time perspective and try to kind of prepare best and be responsible about the long-term preservation. We have a question from YouTube, thanks to Usfa. So the question, I don't know who asked the question, but the question is, what's our panel's thoughts and or experience in preserving localized pirated clone game heritage? For example, pirated games from 80s and 90s. Tapani, please.
Kasettilamerit was practically founded on clone games and pirated games for Commodore 64, as we started with the turbo tapes when Jarkko and others started. And that is something like a bread and butter that we do. We try to we don't try to just find the original programs, but everything that the original not the original, but the end users, what the kids were doing with the computer. So we really want to find the old copied floppies, because there are lots of stuff, not just the pirated games, but there are also modified games. There are the cracked ROMs, first intros, maybe also first demos, and all kinds of other digital material that people were doing. So that that material that the question is about is really the stuff that we are really hunting and trying to find at our best.
Yes, so one thing here is that this kind of heritage is kind of really exciting because it's transgressive, it's innovative. You know, we are talking about hacking, tinkering, stuff that researchers like Melanie Swalwell is publishing now a book with MIT about homebrew games and precisely kind of this approaches. So this is really exciting because it was, you know, that was the elite, that was the exciting time of the era. But I think then there's the kind of practical question of how institutions can approach copyright issues. Niklas, you want to say something, please?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Tapani is saying, that this is important to think of as well. So and I guess it's something that we're also working with at the Game Museum. We sort of want to include these pirated games also in the collections, and maybe it's connected to a bigger idea that games aren't just an industry. They're not just end products that have a final state, but instead they're kind of processes, as you said. There might be different versions, and a pirated version is as important and interesting as a commercial one. And I think it's also related to sort of a shift in our collections, that we're at the whole time sort of looking away from the commercial games and starting to look at the non-commercial production of games. What kinds of games people have made for fun, or how they have modded existing games, often illegally, and how they have maybe had like independent publishing channels for this type of sort of grassroots game making, like floppy magazines, or publishing your code in a magazine as a listing, or just like sharing it with your friends, the game. So I think this is very important, and something that I hope we can discuss and do more in the future.
Yeah, agreed. I think that maybe I'm just kind of putting that idea in the person's mind, the person who asked the question, but I have a feeling that maybe the person was interested in kind of the legal issues, how to deal with this kind of shadow economies and kind of heritage that might be connected to illegal activities. Like in case of Poland or a Soviet bloc, it's not a problem because first of all, there was no copyright until 1994 regarding at least the Western works. I mean, there was no legislation to protect those Western works. And then basically it was a different regime. So now there is no consequence. And even in a way, you are a hero that you were, during the time of communism, kind of gaming the Iron culture, Iron Curtain, gaming the Iron culture. That's an interesting twist on it. But yeah, as Jaroslav would say here probably. So what's the situation in Finland with dealing with this heritage from the 1980s that might be illegal? Lauri, do you have, for example, any experience here?
We really don't have experience on that because those games were never sent to us and we haven't got any donations of that. So I don't know. I probably think that we would have some issues with the copyright law with pirated games, but I'm not an expert on the issue.
Niklas?
Yeah, maybe a couple of words on sort of the copyright side. In the EU, we now have a new law in effect, which gives heritage institutions copyright exemption. And I'll send a link to the chat. There's the new portal where you are able to inform that works are out of commerce, or if you are a copyright holder, you can sort of inform that it is not out of commerce. So that's a portal which heritage institutions hopefully in the future can use to sort of get these exemptions. And I guess it would also help in the sort of, well, first of all, to exhibit old games in their exhibitions. It would make it legal, and probably legal also to change them, and probably also legal to show changed version, pirated versions or hacked versions of the games. Then again, also the hackers kind of have because they're also making work, so they kind of have a copyright as well, but maybe that's not a thing that we should need to think of that much, but sort of course in the best case scenario is always to directly ask the people who have the copyright or have made some changes to programs, but always it's not always possible. But I think this is an interesting new development and something I'm really looking forward to actually make the things that we are doing in museums legal, I guess.
Yes, so this is an initiative that EFGAMP, European Federation of Museums, well, related to game preservation. I'm sorry that I don't know what is the full acronym description, but it's a very interesting institution in which many museums are involved, including Finnish Museum of Games, right?
Yeah, and it's a much bigger thing than just EFGAMP. EFGAMP is one of the stakeholders who have sort of been commenting on this, but this is a huge thing because it's related to all kinds of culture, to art and music and software in general and games in particular. So it is going to be a big change, I guess.
Well, I guess it shows that, big institutions as big as the European Union are kind of recognizing that this is a part of heritage that we have to preserve, and we have to preserve it now, and we need the tools. And I also like the spin, kind of how you phrase it, because we often kind of forget that to preserve games, we have to often basically crack them. This is what Tapani does. And then with the already, with the crackers, you have to crack the crackers in a way too. So there are many kind of time layers of hacking involved in preserving heritage connected to coding. I don't think we have any questions from the YouTube as far. There was a question by Satu to Lauri, what are the criteria when digital games should be taken into collection? I think you partially answered that because I asked a similar question, but maybe Lauri, you would like to elaborate on it. So like, what about the amateur stuff?
Amateur stuff is also taken into the collection. The criteria is that if it's made and published in Finland, it should be in our collection. But because we know digital games are worldwide phenomenon and Finnish games aren't just published in Finland, so it's kind of a tricky thing to kind of interpret what is published in Finland. But yeah, if it's made in Finland, it's stuff we get.
Okay, I think it's an interesting segue to move the kind of international aspects, because as we can see, preservation of game heritage in Finland works very well, which I think is related to good communication in many ways, that you have these round tables, that you discuss stuff together, and you have different stakeholders that are basically talking to each other. So I think that is very kind of something we should all aspire to. But what about international collaborations? Are you involved? I would assume maybe starting from the retro gaming, because like chronologically, that was the community that kind of emerged first. And thanks to the internet, the kind of exchange of knowledge was important from the get-go. What are your kind of experiences with Tapani, with international collaboration in regard of your work?
I'm not personally a member of the Software Preservation Society, but some of our members are. SPS is like our umbrella organization that operates in broader scope, and we do supply some original games to their collection. But otherwise, we are not that connected to other organizations, except, of course, the Demoscene and all the connections that we have accumulated while finding stuff, because Finnish games were not just published in Finland. Some people went straight to the publishers in the UK or Germany. So we have more informal connections to people from various European and US gaming companies. Many of them are actually already retired, but some are also active in the industry at the moment. But those are more like special cases in our case.
So do you, for example, get any kind of questions, for example, from people trying to preserve a specific title somewhere, in the world, and like asking for help as you have expertise?
Yes, sometimes we get also requests for some specific titles or general help on how to do something, but usually that is somehow coming through the SPS, which is the larger organization. Yeah, I was trying to think about different cases.
Okay, so mostly it is the collaboration with the kind of North American initiatives here.
Yeah, and in the industry level, it's in Europe, in association level in North America. Yeah.
Okay, so no other continents, no connections to Japan, for example. I guess they are more focused on consoles.
There is actually I don't remember its name, probably it's something like Japanese Preservation Society or something. It was actually led by French guy, Philippe something. that we have been thinking about contacting when we have been looking at the MSX stuff and stuff like that, but that has not yet been something that we have done. And there have maybe been some loose contacts to Australia, and in the MSX front, some contacts maybe to Middle East, but I don't remember anything going towards the Middle or South America or China.
Or Antarctica. No, yeah. But we are playing games in Antarctica.
Yeah, they are not just making them. At least I don't know.
Yeah, at least I haven't heard about any South Pole game jam. Maybe this is like a niche that we should explore. But yeah, I think it's like there's a pattern in what you are saying, that usually those kind of collaborations on the international level within the retro gaming kind of preservation efforts are related to a specific platform that might have been popular in a given country. Again, Poland is a very good example with the 8-bit Atari games because they had a really long life in the 90s. Then there is a lot of expertise in the little Atari machines here. So basically that was the reason you were looking for connections in regard of MSX, which is again a kind of mirror of what we are doing in academia with comparative game histories and looking at kind of reception of different platforms and different cultures in different countries. I guess there is slowly a momentum in that area gaining and maybe in the next, in this decade, because we are already living in the future, you know. So yeah, maybe this will be developed. This is definitely something I would like to work on more. Satu, what about your collaborations? Because with the UNESCO project, it kind of relies on European collaborations, or are you even looking at other countries? Like the Japanese scene is very interesting, maybe more recently, not as old as the European scenes, but are there any other efforts internationally outside of Europe, and how is the European collaboration going on?
Well, first of all, the European collaboration, I think it's going quite well, but there could be more countries that start their own kind of project of getting them the same recognition. So it's kind of a working project, but we're getting there. And also there is some countries where there is a lot of difficulties, like in Turkey. It's a very traditional country, so they kind of think about historical heritage more traditional way, like the kind of church materials and art and stuff like that, and they don't really kind of see. So we have some kind of challenges in some countries with the art of coding project. But yeah, well, of course, Demoscene is very international, but it is very Eurocentric. But there is, at least in Russia, there has been demo parties. There has been demo parties in Japan. There has been also in South America. And we've actually went on the demo party in United States. So there is a lot of collaboration around the world. But of course, it's not always very organized. And I think the Europeans, they are the kind of majority in this matter.
Lauri, how it looks in your case, because you are a national library, so you are really focused on what is happening in Finland, but I assume you would be exchanging knowledge with similar institutions, at least in the Nordics. How it looks in your case?
We haven't done that much collaboration with other national libraries. We definitely should do more because we don't have the answers to all of our questions about preserving. So definitely collaborations between national libraries is really important. So that's one of the things we should do more in the future. But right now we haven't done that much.
So Niklas, I guess it is your turn to say something about your international collaborations.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're also part in the art of coding, which Sato talked about, and I think it's a very interesting thing that she mentioned, that there are some problems in other countries about sort of recognizing the Demoscene as intangible heritage. And as Satu said, that's probably connected to like quite conservative institutions in those countries. But it might also be connected a little bit to the Demosceners themselves, or the people who are trying to make it intangible heritage, because they probably don't really have any know-how of how heritage works or any connections. So they might come from a completely different field, and I think the problem is probably that they don't really understand each other or what the other values. So that's definitely a case, and I'm hoping that sort of the Finnish case might help those, and we've been a little bit active in sort of showing how we did it here in Finland. It was my colleague Heikki Jungman, who was in charge at the Finnish Museum of Games, of sort of coordinating this and talking with the different stakeholders. And Satu was very active as well from the sort of Demoscene side. And the people at the Finnish Heritage Institution, Leena Marsio especially, were really helpful in sort of explaining us what is important. And it's kind of exactly the things that the Demoscene itself doesn't maybe think are the important ones. So it's the values, it's the community. It's not the digital artifacts or the material artifacts. It's how the community as a whole operates. So that's something that we've been working with. And the other thing is the FCAMP network that you mentioned already. And I always also forget what it's an acronym of, but it's European Federation of let me check here. Federation of Video Game Archives, Museums and Preservation Projects, something that was founded some years ago by people like Andreas Lange, who used to be director at the Computerspiel Museum in Berlin. So we are, the Finnish Museum of Games is part of that, as is Philippe Dubois, who we probably talked about earlier, who is a French activist who is working with games and probably Japanese games as well. So it's a nice network, and most of the museums who are part of that are kind of hobbyist collections who have turned into actual museums, which is a bit different from our background, because we are a collaboration first and foremost, and the museum organization existed before the Finnish Museum of Games. So there's maybe, in the Finnish case, there's more museum expertise involved in this, or more like museum thinking. So that makes it a bit different, but of course it's interesting to talk with the colleagues and sort of take the scene forward, and there's lots of good initiatives that they have been doing, and people are really active in Germany and Italy. The Vigamus Foundation has been really active in the work as well, and some national libraries. So the Royal Danish Library is part of the network, as is the Royal Swedish Library. So I'm sure that the National Library would also be welcome in this group. And maybe I still mention the sort of academic collaboration, because I think that's also very important and something that sort of maybe pushes things forward as well. Now you're mute. Yeah.
Yes. At least I hope that the academia is somewhat helpful. But of course, many of the academics that were involved with game histories and in Finland from very early on, like Petteri Sarikoski, his work, like really pioneering papers from 2003, and then Jaakko Suominen, Maiku Eunanen, and many others that I cannot even list here because it will take like half an hour that we have left. but they are retro gamers, themselves. So like it's a passion that that usually kind of bleeds into your papers, and then suddenly you realize that you are a professor of digital culture, like in case of Jaakko. Jaakko Suominen. But yeah, I really think, I think, for example, Lauri is being very, shy here, saying that, we have to learn, like the international collaboration is so we can learn from other people. But I also think that basically there is this Finnish success story, and it's also important that the other people can learn from you. And to, for that to be possible, I think it's important to try to understand why this collaboration on the Finnish level worked and works so well. So I wonder if we can have a short round here. What do you kind of find the most valuable in the collaboration? Like, if I can say from my perspective as an outsider, I think that the way you communicate is very admirable. And I think one of my friends even told me that in like finance and business studies she was doing at a business school, I think in Canada, there was a case study that about the Finnish kind of negotiating methods, that Finns are always trying to listen to the different stakeholders, and usually the negotiations are really slow, but they are very effective in the way that we are hearing out all the parties. So that is kind of my input here, but I'm kind of interested on how do you see that collaboration and the kind of most valuable elements of that from your own perspective. Who would like to start? Lauri, is it you?
I don't know. I probably should let someone else start. I'm still gathering my thoughts.
Niklas?
Yeah, I guess I can start. Well, collaboration is key. Collaboration makes our work possible. I don't think it would be possible in the way that we're doing it now if we didn't collaborate. But that's kind of also maybe connected to the sustainability idea, that I think it's also quite a radical idea in the museum field, sort of what I feel a museum should do. And what I feel museums should do is help people engage with their own heritage to keep it alive. And that's kind of not how people usually think of museums, or how museums usually think of themselves, because there's kind of maybe the different idea of heritage, which is connected to museums are the experts, and they are the ones who use their curatorial expertise in sort of picking things that they think are important, and then they put them in the collections, and they are kind of saved and preserved in that way. But for me, a more sustainable way to do this is to try to keep the heritage alive, try to listen to people. What do you think is important? Why do you want to preserve this? And then help them to preserve it. So I think it's maybe two different types of thinking here, and sort of in some ways the ideas I'm putting forward here are quite radical for heritage institutions. And I don't know, maybe one step for working with game heritage might be to take this radical step, or do something in that way.
Satu?
Yeah, I would not say that idea is any radical, because right now I'm working at the National Museum and they are kind of thinking about their brand and strategy, and there is a lot of talk about what is our heritage in the future. And I think this is basically exactly what people are talking about and what they think about. We are for the community. The museums, they don't preserve something just for preserving. There needs to be a reason, and the community is the reason. And I think this is very much the idea that is very I think a lot of big organizations are taking into this, and this is very kind of on trend on museum field, I would say. So I'm seeing this kind of thinking a lot around me, and I'm very happy about it because I agree totally. I think we are for the community, and this is, we should not be some kind of higher thing doing something that, okay, now we decide what is important and what is not. It should be what the community thinks that is meaningful. So I agree totally, Niklas, with you. And I think these are very important topics. And I think this is also the direction where we are heading. That's what I see around me right now.
Yeah, so basically the approach is not that, you know, you are the authoritarian kind of curators, or what would be the term here, that, you know, you are protecting the heritage, so only the valuable things will be, you know, that you are kind of making the calls here, but you are trying, like, kind of listening and trying to understand. Actually, you tell me what is valuable for you so I can understand. Tapani, what is your experience as a you know, retro gamer? Because, like, you approached, I guess you were the person approaching the institutions, or did the museums approach you? How did it work?
I'm kind of late joiner to Kasettilamerit, so Kasettilamerit was already doing collaboration, at least with National Library, Gaming Museum, and probably some other institutions. So Kasettilamerit has been probably contacting them before they contacted us. But when I started, I don't think that anyone has contacted me, but I'm kind of annoying in that sense that I spent lots of my time just sending emails to people asking questions. I have been sending some right now because there are some cases that are kind of hot at the moment in my activities. So I have been contacting at least Niklas recently, and I should be contacting Lauri and the Technical Museum of Finland. And I'm also been contacting all kinds of smaller museums all around Finland, because I have seen that they have a picture in their homepage and there is a computer in some corner. And I have been asking, do you know what that is? And have you thought about seeing what is on the hard drive of that computer from 80s that you have there under the piano or something? So in my case, I'm the one contacting people all the time and institutions. And that is good thing in Finland, that the institutions, they do answer you. Sometimes it takes time, but you always get an answer. Or maybe not. There is one, but it's in the governmental ministry section. Their archive has not been really helpful, but that's like the 1 out of 100.
In Poland, we would say that this is the exception that kind of, you know, shows the rule works.
Yeah,
but you are very proactive. I think that is also very showing here that, you know, you are active, you are trying to contact the different institutions. And, you know, the best kind of experience I have, or the most experience I have, is the Polish case, where maybe basically the institutions are not responding because they don't know what to do. They don't have the funds, which is also, of course, another issue that with Finland, I guess, the financial situation is better. So there are some resources, at least, But I guess in Poland also the kind of recognition of this heritage is just kind of really slow. Niklas, please, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I guess I would like to continue on the sort of discussion about heritage institutions as institutions that help people preserve their heritage, which I think is quite unique. I think most of us, or probably all of us here, agree on that. But of course, there's also maybe like I don't know, potential downsides to that, because sort of I'd say that there's potential problems in because we can't, if we understand heritage as something that we support, that and is also sort of shared generational experience of people, it might be difficult to sort of listen to everybody in a society. Now there was a perfect moment in a way to listen to the players and gamers and game makers, but there's all kinds of other communities that aren't getting listened to. So if the heritage institutions were sort of more concerned maybe with showing heritage as something that is maybe sort of polyphonic in a way, that it's many different ways, it might be difficult to do it in a sort of in this communal way. So I still feel that the heritage institutions are important here, and they can sort of maybe when collaborating they can ask the difficult questions as seen. They can maybe put into question some games that do we really need to or want to preserve this. For example, like the Holocaust denying games that have been published in Germany, or like just simply bullying games that have been published in Finland. So are those really part of the heritage? Do we want to include them? Or if we include them, should we maybe do something to them before including them? So it's not just like, let's take everything and put it on display, because there's also like society has negative aspects. There's dark heritage that we need to somehow also deal with. And I think we need a special kind of expertise when doing that. And the communities don't necessarily have that. So, and museums might have that as pedagogical institutions. So I don't know.
Academia.
Or academia. So I don't know if I'm kind of a little bit sidetracking the discussion here, but I think this is also a thing we should remember when discussing this.
Well, of course, it's not all. I'm painting a very nice success story here, but of course there are problems everywhere. And as I mentioned just before, that funding is always an issue, and without the crowdfunding support, the Finnish museum might not be realized, at least to the extent it has been. So there are different problems, and with the comparative game histories, when we are kind of looking at how it was done in different countries, then we can maybe also better understand and be more kind of critical as we kind of remove ourselves from the national context and try to look at Finland outside. From the outside perspective, we can see also things that are maybe, more problematic. And as Niklas is saying, it is absolutely okay because societies and histories are very complex. And we shouldn't be afraid to tackle those issues. And in a way, these illegal activities are an issue like that. Cracking and hacking, because not all hacking is white hat hacking. So there are problems here that are getting actually in the past few years more and more problematic. So of course it's a complex picture, and I guess this is why we are here as researchers, because for enthusiasts enthusiast retro gamers, I mean, to speak about their own history, something that is very dear to them, to be critical is very hard. I had this experience writing about a Polish game magazine from the 90s that is a cult magazine, and did a lot of good things for establishing of Polish game cultures in the 90s, but it also was quite sexist and misogynist at times, and it's also part of that culture. So we shouldn't be afraid of talking about that, about issues such as Gamergate and such, because they are part of that culture as well, and we just have to, with the kind of benefit of hindsight, as historians, we have a possibility to learn from these experiences, and with our kind of critical inquiries, maybe help the society, make better choices in the future. So in that sense, the role of heritage institutions is also educational in a sense. Anyone would like to continue? You don't have to kind of react to this kind. I kind of went kind of heavyweight here with big problems, but yeah, Satu.
Yeah, I could also a little bit remind that also there is this thing that time, it changes our perspective. If you think about some games, as there's like this game in Finnish that you have like different silly families, and then there is this black guy. Of course, right now, if you look at it, it might seem a little bit offensive, and it's not, and also racist. So some things that in some days seemed totally normal and okay might not seem that way 50 years from now. So if we do something in some kind of perspective right now, we might change our minds later. But I think this is something that we just need to consider, and something that we cannot predict the future totally, but we might change our minds and our point of view about the matters that we present today. And as Niklas said, it's important also museums to give their voice and their curatorship as a way of kind of the community, so that they can be more objective. But also to people working in museums, they also have their own way of looking at things. So it's kind of impossible for you to make these decisions totally without any kind of pre-thoughts or kind of, how do you say? Well, you always look at things from your own perspective, so it kind of always affects in some way. But I think it's not something that we can totally take away, but we just need to be aware of.
Well, of course, this is a very good point that, well, looking at the 1980s, 1990s, maybe 10 years ago, we would look kind of at this, at the games, and try to interpret them from more modern perspective with like a feminist theory. And nowadays, 10 years later, maybe it's more identity politics, and kind of our views are changing. And in many ways, of course, the exhibitions that are created in a given time are telling us more about the current moment, how, what are the issues that we are currently as a society involved in, and, what we are rethinking, whether it is racism, misogyny, or any other things, or climate change, for example, right? So of course, these things will change, and in 10 years, we will be looking at different issues. But I guess what is important for us here is that we have games that we can reevaluate, and that we have the heritage that we can still work with. Lauri.
Yeah, from our perspective, what Niklas and Satu kind of talked about, that we should do some sort of choice what we preserve, is from our point of view, kind of, we really can't do that, because we really want to preserve everything, and it's kind of not our job to curate or give the perspective to that. For example, we were doing the game exhibition 2 years ago, and we exhibited old war games from the 1940s, and kind of like, if we don't have them, we can't context them in current age. So if we now think that, you know, game published in 2021, that it might not be important, we kind of do harm to, you know, researchers in the later years, because it might be important artifact of the current age in 2070s, for example. So I think what we can do as collaborators is that we are the stakeholder who really has, you know, the games and everything, and the museums are the ones who does the contextualizing for that stuff. So there's, you know, there's that kind of collaboration. And what we actually do is the round table of game preserving, where museums and we and Kasettilamerit are part of. And I think in the future, we might even think that there are more hobbyists in the round table, or even more stakeholders. That's my thoughts on that.
Niklas, please.
Yeah, I totally agree with Lauri as well. And I guess from a museum's perspective, that's that the differences between collections and exhibitions. So collections might include lots of stuff, or in the case of the National Library, everything that's published. And museums, of course, have stuff in their collections that are not on display, or usually have that. And exhibitions then again are more about what the museum chooses now to deal with, what it chooses to showcase, what it chooses to interact with, and also in what kinds of ways. So in the exhibition phase, it might be critical of some of the objects in its collections. And I think and Lauri is completely right that something that now doesn't seem that interesting or cannot be displayed might be very interesting in the future. And a good example from the Tampere Historical Museum's collections is the material that was gathered after the Finnish Civil War here in Tampere, when the battle was still ongoing or had just stopped. So the current curator of the Häme Museum went around in the city, collected destroyed furniture, pieces of glass, and things like this, which were then in the collections for almost 100 years before they were put on display in an exhibition, when the time was kind of right to talk about this. So yeah, exactly. So collections should be big, and exhibitions should be critical and pose also the difficult questions.
That is an amazing story about that 1918, I guess, case. Yeah. Well, I don't think Lauri is, thankfully doesn't have to. Maybe after the COVID, with some bankruptcies, you will be finding some, left desks and kind of broken screens because of, disappointment. But thankfully that will not happen. But yeah, I think that kind of last contribution from Niklas really shows how we have different approaches here, and how National Library has a different goal here, Museum of Games, and then Kasettilamerit, and of course other heritage institutions, and the Demoscene as fans and hobbyists, or just members of the community that want to preserve what is dear to them. We have 10 minutes left, so I was thinking maybe for some final thoughts here. So we know that we are a diverse, group of stakeholders that work together, and at least on the Finnish level, it seems to work well, but maybe there's something still we can improve. So maybe we can have a short round at the end about what are your kind of hopes for the future of this collaboration. Maybe let's not go, in the very long perspective of like 1,000 years, but maybe let's just stick to like this decade. So actually we can do something about it. So please, who would like to start? or we are just perfect?
I can go first because I'm alphabetically first. Okay, so what I hope that I would see is more kind of like common talk with different kind of stakeholders, so that we can create kind of how would I say, good practices for storing different kind of computer programs, and also as how you should kind of consider the material and also kind of like immaterial knowledge that is together, and also the software and hardware. And I hope that well, there is some, I think one kind of project going on where they're thinking about also training conservators that are trained to do also media art, which is kind of art that is represented with there's usually code and like audio and video and stuff like that. So I would like to see more conservators that are knowledgeable with this matter, and I would also like to see more conservators that are within these round tables that are talking about this matter. So that's what I wish to be in the near future.
Thank you, Sato. Niklas, I can see a movement.
You did, okay. Yes, you're good at reading thoughts. I agree with Satu that this is going to be a huge challenge for museums and other heritage institutions. We need digital conservators. We don't have them. There's not anyone training people like this at the moment, or not in a big scale at least. So I'm hoping to get a digital conservator to work with the Finnish Museum of Games. And I guess in other hopes, well, I think it's a good initiative from the National Library to make the roundtable discussions a bit more official, because, well, it has been a strength and not a strength to be super informal this far in our talks. But now is probably a good step to make it a bit more formal, and also to sort of inform others about what we are doing, both nationally and internationally. So that's another thing. And also, yeah, I guess also hope to also participate in the academic research on the subject, and sort of maybe raise new angles and frameworks helping to deal with the subject.
Tapani, regarding the digital curators versus market demand, do you think you can respond?
I was trying to formulate an thought about this, but from my narrow perspective, in general, the collaboration is going so well that I haven't been thinking about what could be done more. That is my problem at the moment. Maybe very rare and hard to believe and situation.
Well, I think that is kind of the essence of the, Finland as the happiest nation in the world. That
you might see
I'm very good in the place.
You might see my problem with this question as I'm looking at the upper corner of this room and trying to come up with something.
But basically, you just want things to continue. That you feel that this collaboration is really valuable and should continue.
Yeah, and probably there will be changes and some things that even I, as a person or our association, wants to see that change. But I think that those will be like something that we can discuss with the others when those things arise, and they are not problems, they are just things to solve. So how we continue with some things and how we do thing X and Y. But at the moment, it's really hard to think about any specifics because things are going so well.
Well, I just envy you, kind of workflow wise, the moment you are that you are just really, satisfied.
Actually, I'm now a bit scared. Maybe things will now go, downhill really fast.
No. Just reject that thought. Everything will be fine. Lauri, you are.
Yes. It was funny that Satu mentioned the digital conservators, because yesterday when I was thinking what I should talk about here was kind of like this future wish that there would be digital conservators, because we still have big holes in our collections considering digital games, for example, mobile games, browser games, because there are so many platforms in the 40-year history of digital games that we really don't have the answers how we preserve everything. So if there are people who know how to preserve these, please let us know. If you want to become a digital conservator, I hope there will be resources for the education, because I'm 100% sure that there will be stakeholders who are really interested in your knowledge in the future.
Great. So as you can see, Tapani, there is a lot of demand for the future. So I'm sure Kasettilamerit, has a bright future, ahead of you. Speaking basically of a lot of tasks and exciting new projects to work with. As for me, coming from the Center of Excellence in Game Culture Studies, that has some sort of horizon. If our funding gets extended, we will be working until 2025. So I just hope that we make most of the time we have together as a partner. But then again, of course, the Center of Excellence is just a part, of a long-term goal of establishing a Finnish school, maybe of game studies, or basically just one step in a long journey of a game research community in Finland. That started in the 1980s. So with the first kind of MAs. There is definitely a community of researchers that are dedicated to game heritage. And we have different opportunities with different grants and research centers as this one. So as we are here and we can help you guys to connect and discuss stuff and maybe bring a different perspective, as I am not a Finnish person, opiskelen suomea, mutta on vaikea kieli. So clearly, I don't understand everything that is happening, but I also have a fresh perspective. And what I'm seeing is really kind of heartwarming. So I'm very happy to be part of this, and I hope we can continue as long as possible. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to the audiences on YouTube for the questions. Thank you to USFA for dealing with the stream, and see you next time with our next GameCult Talk events in the autumn. And the collaborative game histories discussions that will also continue after the summer. So have an excellent summer, and while in the woods, look out for any games that might be left for. You never know, maybe you will find the next Premiere game. So nice treasure hunting. Enjoy the sun. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria.